right, thank you everybody for joining, from BITKRAFT for having me. I'm Brendan Mulligan. I'm the founder and CEO of another BITKRAFT portfolio company, Liminal, but I'm actually just here to moderate today for some much more qualified and interesting individuals. I'll introduce them one at a time. You guys can feel free to come up and take a seat. We've got Kiran Bhat, who's the technical director for foundation models at Roblox, which he joined after they acquired his startup, Loom AI. We've got Wesley Kerr, Riot Games head of AI, and we've got Jorge, the CEO and co-founder of Latent Technologies. All right, so the topic for today is about AI generally, but as you guys can imagine, there are so many different applications we could discuss. So to start us off, I'd like to just have each of you say, from the perspectives of yourselves and your organizations, what are kind of the big opportunities that are most exciting for you specifically?
Oh, I get to go first. So at Riot Games, we build a lot of session-based multiplayer games that have deep engagement, high skill levels, and one of our biggest drivers that we focus on is retention. So how do we get you into the game? How do we keep you in the game as it goes? And there, we've been focusing a lot of time on really thinking about an AI that can play alongside you and who understands the game way better than you do, so that they can gently guide you up through that ladder and help you understand the game deeply and help you get better at every stage of the game. And then a lot of the other efforts that we have are really sort of around efficiency plays and sustaining plays and sort of helping us create more content and more experiences for our players that will delight them.
Okay, I can go. At Latent, we are building a generative physics animation engine. We want to make animation physical and emergent. And I think the implications of this go a bit beyond mere efficiency increase. Things like this suggest new paradigms, and that's exactly what excites me, paradigm shifts. I like when AI can enable things that were not previously possible before and can give quantum leaps in the way that video games are built and experienced.
Hey, so Roblox is a gaming platform more than a game itself. So many of the efforts that we have going on in AI fall under two buckets, predominantly AI for safety and AI for creativity. So to keep the platform safe at scale, when you have text chat and voice chat and other modalities with lots of younger players on the platform, we use AI extensively to monitor and keep our people within the terms of services of the platform. That's on the safety side. And on the creativity side, we've rolled out a number of tools for creation of 3D content, because Roblox is a UGC platform built by creators who are smaller teams, 2 or 3 people teams, typically, and with fairly limited 3D experience. So a lot of our focus has been to help these creators produce much higher quality content while still being performant on the platform. And there's a lot of animation in other areas as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's interesting to hear there's kind of a spectrum from incremental and sometimes defensive technologies to the more kind of large, huge bets, especially from the startups willing to take these big risks. I'm curious, specifically just for Wes and Kiran to start, your organization's essentially, relative to most of us startups, it feels like you have infinite resources. I know it doesn't feel that way always internally, but compared to Jorge and me making our hiring plan, that's how it sometimes feels from the outside. I'm curious, from the perspective of the big company, though, what are the unique barriers that you have? What makes it challenging to achieve these things from your organizations that are clearly already bought in and have these resources?
I want you to go first because I want to be jealous of your ability to actually ship to players.
Infinite resources is a very nice situation for everybody. But I think the challenges of building anything and shipping anything at Roblox scale is what makes this whole effort worthwhile and also extremely challenging. Because Roblox runs on all kinds of legacy devices and also has a very broad spectrum of users, we have to think primarily about edge cases. And thinking about edge cases where, maybe a very old device or, like a language which is not currently supported, those are really interesting, juicy challenges for AI. So even though we can build a feature quickly, just deploying it at scale suddenly brings in a lot of challenges. So you have to pull in huge amount of computational resources, and then the sort of the team that can pull these features off. So typically that balloons into a larger group working together, and you know how complex that can be.
Yeah, I think ours are similar, but also slightly different. So one of the things I've been watching with envy of Roblox over the past couple of years is their ability to actually take an idea and ship it to players and let it impact them. So whether it be code completion in the interface or some of the other materials work that you all have done has been great. But that ability to iterate with the player and understand what's working and what's not can tend to be much harder for Riot when it can affect our brand and our games negatively if perceived poorly. So we spend a lot more time focusing on ensuring we've got the right core, the right game, the right skins, concepts, all of that before we ever unleash it to players. And so in an era where AI is rapidly evolving and rapidly changing what it is, it means I get to ship less to players that is frankly not good, but learning material for us. And that means we get less data from it. We sort of can iterate more slowly than a startup would in this case. So even though we have the infinite resources, we can also lose too much brand recognition or tarnish our brand if we ship the bad stuff.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, that points me to Jorge, which is obviously we have a different set of constraints as startups, but there does seem like in some of their answers, there's an opportunity for startups with things that we can do that they can't. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we don't have infinite resources. And that makes you think very, very hard about what you want to do. So in a startup, everything changes. You need to have a spear and like put it very tightly where you want what you want to transform, right? Being very strong-headed in the vision and flexible in the execution. So we can take more risks, especially when you want to propose a new paradigm for something. But especially for a product that is very research-based, it's challenging to be focused in product, right? And a lot of startups that I'm seeing around get this part a bit wrong. They could be very, very research-based. They can have very interesting results, but being very divorced from the actual game development workflow. That, I think, is a challenging for startups in the industry that we are trying to get right. And of course, well, to your question about the challenges of big startups big companies that startups could face, the answer is just too broad. There could be a company focusing on a very small part, trying to help Kiran and Wes, for example, with the edge cases. And there could be others that try to make something a bit more broad. So, yeah. The answer would be too long, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. No, it's great. I think you raised another thing that I'm interested in, which is this idea that we were actually just talking about in the back, which is in AI, which is such a research-focused field, there's so much you could explore. There's so many researchers who want to invent the next big thing, but then productionizing that research and putting it into something that a company would actually want to use is a major challenge at all sizes. I guess for any of you, would you tell me more about that? I know that's something you've all faced.
We spend a lot of time thinking about what's differentiated for Riot versus what the industry will settle for us. This goes back to a conversation we were fortunate to come up and chat with OpenAI way back a couple years ago. And Sam basically said, look, figure out what is going to make Riot better, focus on that, leave all the rest to vendors to sort of solve for you. And so I've been watching very closely image generation, 3D generation, animation work, because those are opportunities for us to partner and buy with what they have, while quickly trying to figure out what are the things Riot needs to do to make our games more sticky, more retention, where are we not going to let a vendor play as part of that core game experience, and make sure that we're leveraging AI in that way in order to help us adapt for the new changes.
Yeah, Ken, I'm interested in your take on that as well, the research versus product.
Yeah, I think I think I agree with the insight here. Many of the big companies will want to protect and innovate in an area that they think is their secret sauce. So if your secret sauce is the game engine, yeah, you're gonna put all your energy innovating, and you're most likely not gonna acquire a startup unless there is a very strategic fit and a fit to the roadmap you're building, right? So it's probably very obvious, but I think that's mostly how acquisitions happen. But anything that is not core is ripe for acquisition, and so these two systems can coexist, and also partnerships. But if you are developing something that falls straight within the roadmap of a big company and they are actively trying to innovate there as a startup, then that's a really exciting space for you to be. But the place where things go wrong, as you pointed out, is if the research teams in startups are not paying close attention to the end game, the actual product, then suddenly it gets valued only as a research institution, which may not carry as much weight in some of the gaming circles.
I want to ask you more about that concept of kind of the core roadmap, especially because if the thinking of it is, well, here's the thing that we're already very good at, so let's make sure we leverage that. That can push you into a little bit of an innovator's dilemma, though, right? I mean, I think if you're Wes and you're saying, hey, well, we make these session-based, highly retentive games that rely on other people being present all the time, so let's just do that, but with AI. How do you consider the opportunity that might be adjacent to that doesn't leverage your strengths, and are you worried about those things passing you by?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really what the leaders at Roblox keep worrying about. Essentially, don't fall into a trap, and that's one of the reasons why we started this Foundation AI team at Roblox, where we are trying to build the next generation of a 3D foundation model, similar to the text models out there, but with really a large quantity of 3D data that we may have on the platform. So there's always that fear that you're not looking at the problem correctly, or there's this other startup on the side that's going to completely surprise you. That's unlikely, but does happen, and that's why we keep an eye out on all the interesting startups. And when we do see trace signs of that, then we definitely go for it, right? So, but it's a balance, because if you think of the advantages that some of these incumbents have, like for example, I talked about this voice safety system that we built. I mean, you could not have built it without the kinds of data sets that are on the platform. So sometimes that's what is the moat that prevents the startups from doing this. And the other thing in AI is there's so much open source innovation that's going on there. So the architectures are not really the big deal right now. So startups looking at this space should ideally look at saying, hey, well, if I don't have the data moat, if I don't have the architecture moat, what is it that I'm bringing to the table? That's
a great framing. Thank you. Wes, you want to answer a little more on that?
Yeah, I was trying to think of how to frame my answer. I like Kiran's answer a lot. The bit that we add on that we've been racing towards is we recognize that we just are unlikely to keep out pumping out session-based multiplayer games that resonate for years. But we need to figure out where that puck is moving in the next 6 to 8 years as we work on some more complex games. And so we're spending a very large amount of time racing to the bottom to figure out what the real innovation and what it will be, what that disruption will look like. I've talked to many startups, and oftentimes it's sort of a surface level disruption. So I've seen many demos, not calling out any names or places, where it's you sit down and you chat with an avatar in a game. But fundamentally, as a player, I still just want to go play the game. I didn't log in to play for 2 hours talking at a campfire. And helping startups sort of recognize that the game play still has to be amazing. It still has to draw me in. It still has to keep me there. And AI has to figure out how it's going to weave through that. And so I've chatted with a lot of them. We've come up with lots of different ideas, just trying to figure out what that new gameplay enablement will be from AI, and sort of racing towards that to sort of make sure that we are recognizing what's coming.
I love that. Great answer. Thank you. It's interesting because both of you are pointing to something that I've thought about a lot, which I think is oftentimes missed when we see a lot of the headlines coming out of OpenAI and all those things, that it feels like the technical stuff is what's on the frontier and that's what matters. But it seems like almost universally in our answers here, what we're hearing is the technical thing is not what's actually the most interesting. Like from a product perspective, that's not where most of us should be playing. We don't need to be thinking about architecture in that same way. It's really a design challenge. It's coming up with like, what is a player problem that we can solve? Talk to me a little bit about how that shapes kind of how you build your team. Because if it's just a purely research and technical problem, that's one type of team. If it's a product problem and a player problem, that's a very different type of team.
I'll add one quick thing there. I think I wouldn't characterize it as technical only or product only. I would say, what is your differentiator? It could be a technical differentiator where you are able to serve these models 10x cheaper than what a OpenAI could or some other thing, some other player could. So that is also a huge deal. So sometimes these infrastructure innovations can be what allows you to deploy a product. And yes, of course, ultimately there's a product. So, but sorry, please.
What was the question?
Yeah, just you could build a team of just researchers doing all the craziest technical shit and maybe compete with Sam and those guys. But at some point, you have got to connect it to product. How does that change the way you construct your teams?
So at Riot, the research team is actually quite small by comparison. We have 6 people working on game AI, 6 people working on generative AI. Not a huge research organization, which means we have to be very focused on what we go after in order to make sure it's delivering the most value. To do that, we partner with our internal, it's called Riot, it's RDS. I forget what the acronym stands for. We have a bunch of them. I'm sure everyone does as well. But this is basically our backlog, our R&D team that's building the next generation of games. And so we partner very closely with them to see what they're thinking about from a design side. And their product leaders are telling us what they view the vision of gaming over the next 20 years to be. And then it's like, okay, what is the research challenges from that product that we need to go after and solve now so that when that comes about, we're in the right place to go after it. And that product lead has been super valuable for us. It's been a great partner to come in and say, yeah, I think it's going to be these, and starts calling some shots, and that really guides our research, although it makes it a lot harder for us to talk about it. And so we have to find other ways to keep our researchers happy in publishing.
Yeah, that leads to another great point, which is how do you hire in this market? There's a lot of money floating around for AI engineers. I'm sure that this is going to be especially interesting for you, Jorge, like with a different set of resources. What does hiring look like, and how do you differentiate yourself as an employer?
In a startup, you need to take a lot of care with the people that you hire. And typically in the first stages, you go and personally source the people or talk to them or hire them. And a lot of things need to vibe. You cannot allow to make a lot of mistakes. Then the next question is, how do you build your team? Your initial question, right? And this needs to reflect the vision and mentality of the startup. In our case, half the company is dedicated to core technology, and the other half is dedicated to prototyping and integration. And this is going to be kept this way, because it's really important that those two teams are interacting together to build something that is actually productive and playable. That's our goal, right, as you scale. And AI is expensive, and a startup can have a startup has an asset that big companies don't have that much, fundamentally and structurally, which is passion and the ability to work in something that is risky, I think. When a couple guys get together and say, hey, imagine what this could be, right? Let's build it. And then they go and take a huge risk. If you bet a huge company on a bet like that, then that could be very risky by definition, right? So that passion is also an asset for the employees. Options in the company and imagining what it could be are other assets that bigger companies don't have. And the ability to work in a startup, like a lot of people that we hire in the end, they come from big corporations. I come from big corporations, right? And that could be something bad or something good. And a lot of people, they want to be in a dynamic environment where they could be versatile as well and say, we tell them, hey, you're going to need to make a lot of stuff, like need to be versatile. And a lot of people, they love it. because they feel like they're doing things. In big corporations, sometimes, and I'm not generalizing, the passion is a bit more spread out. You wonder why you're doing what you're doing. There are a lot of levels of hierarchy, and it takes a lot to make something that actually is real. Sometimes it feels like negotiating with your own company with different divisions, right? So all of those are assets that startup have. And with a smaller team comes a greater agility as well. It's harder to turn ship on a big company. Even if it's made with smaller teams, as I was in my past, it's still hard.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. What about you, Wes?
Yeah, I want to challenge it just so in case people are looking to hire, they come work for me instead. So it is. I think hiring is really hard for us as well, given that we can't compete with the salaries of OpenAI. And so for top researchers just looking for cash, the cash play is to go to the big research labs. Like Jorge, we offer an opportunity to come in and start to build and prototype your own research. So our team is like half your company, where we're building prototypes and iterating there. And that similar draw, I agree that that is huge for a scientist. To sort of lure them away. And then the other side that we've spent a lot more time looking at is how do we level up all the Rioters internally. And so originally when we first started talking about this, it was like, all right, who is top talent in the world that we'd go after and chase and try to buy with our deep pockets? And we slowly flipped it on its head, and it said, we got 5,000 Rioters who are really great people. How do we level up their capabilities in AI so that they're all contributing and firing on all cylinders there? And so we spent a lot of time focusing on that in the last year. And then we're getting ready to start ramping up the other side of hiring as well again.
Kiran?
Yeah, I can give you a perspective from my days at a startup. I was a founder of Loom AI. That was in 2016. AI was just starting. We were building real-time AI-based tracking on mobile devices. So, and then subsequently at Roblox. So, in my mind, the reason why somebody goes to a startup is to work with a small group of really passionate people on a specific problem, right? So if the problem is really interesting to you, you get drawn to the startup. And especially if the startup already has a few people who you admire or you know about, then I think it's a draw. And I think that's a challenge for bigger companies because the company has a much bigger profile than the founders of a startup or a small team of startups. So I think there is a natural draw for people to go to startups and do risky things. And startups also give you a lot of flexibility in terms of, you can work from anywhere, blah, blah, blah. And there's a strong sense of camaraderie and team, which all comes with a small team, right? So in bigger companies, that's obviously a challenge, right? I mean, I think every group is like a big startup, so you lose a little bit of that. But companies tend to do a good job of trying to preserve that culture. But the bigger difference is, especially with AI, the bigger companies sometimes have the deep pockets to take a large number of risks. So they are not just betting on one idea panning out. Maybe they're betting on 4 ideas panning out. And all of the 4 can fail, and you're not on the street. So that is the advantage of a big company. But and some people like that. That not everyone wants to work in a company which is very, very exciting and passionate for them, but then they know that it may not turn out, and they'll have to go look for a job. So I'm not painting the big companies in a bad way. I'm just saying that the trade-offs are that you get to work on bigger problems, bigger impact potentially, strong teams, but stable. Whereas a startup is much more exciting. Things can fall apart, but that's the fun.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing. Adventure is a big sell point. I started up an adventure, and I think I told someone once, do you wanna go and work to Meta, or do you wanna take the ring to Mordor? Because sometimes it feels like that. Like a lot of stuff is going to happen, and there is also something very, very special about building something almost from scratch, or building features that you need because you have determined that you need them, so you need to build them. It's not just an add-on. It's something like, oh, guys, we need to do this. We need to do this fast. We need to do like this. That is super exciting. And a lot of people are looking for excitement because maybe they worked, I don't know, at Google for like 10 years. And maybe the money is covered in that aspect. And they want a little bit of adventure and excitement and to build something and put a big part of themselves into a product that they can love.
If you could change the minds of big companies about any topic that you could work with, what would you want them to be thinking differently about, Jorge? And I'm going to ask the same question in reverse of, like, what do you wish startups were thinking about better or knowing better? Because I know they come and pitch you guys as well all the time. So, but
in a way, I understand their concerns. So it's not that I wish to change them. I wish to work together to build something valuable. I wouldn't say, hey, I wish that you would buy our stuff. Of course, I would wish that, yeah. But if they have concerns, it's also for a reason that makes a lot of sense. So the important thing is to build an actual relationship to say, hey, what do you guys want to do in the future? And it's a process of just, thinking about the future and having conversations about visions that sometimes can turn into a project that is very good. Well, in general for the industry, and not only for big companies, I wish that, for example, in gaming, we would stop obsessing so much about making the games of today a little bit better and start thinking a bit more about how they can look tomorrow, right? And that kind of mindset, I've had a lot of conversations that was some level as well. And that's my wish, and that's what I want to prove as well as a startup. You cannot change it magically. You need to actually prove it as well.
That's great. I love it. Wes, what do you wish startups did differently or thought about differently when they came to talk to you?
I think I mentioned a little bit about it, but I love chatting with startups. I take every call that I can. We talk about product. We talk about what they're building. I think where I struggle the most often is getting them to think about it from not only what the product is they're building, but also what's the gameplay experience for the player. And the player, and for Riot, is the most important thing. We build games for those players, and so it's sort of ingrained in our DNA to start thinking about, okay, well, what is that player experience that you're driving, and why is that better than what we had before? And so when they come, sometimes with some vendors, it'll take a couple hours to get them over that hump of not just selling their product, but like, what new thing can we unlock with this capability for players that is going to excite and delight them and keep them coming back for more?
Yeah, and from my perspective, for startups, go take the investor money, try something super crazy, but keep an edge. So be very clear on what your edge is, and see if there is a product market fit with a big company.
I'm curious, as we're coming towards the end, of maybe a fun question for you guys, which is, Wes, if you had to leave Riot to go work at a startup, what opportunities are most exciting to you in the world right now that you would want to go after?
It's a loaded question because Brendan and I almost did a startup together.
Wes was going to be my co-founder, and I'm not in any way hurt by that still.
So I think for me, it still would be a gaming startup that would leverage small teams to build amazing experiences very quickly, iterate with their players in order to understand what they need, learn from that in order to race towards that hockey puck that we know is moving over there, but with a very concrete idea of like why this product should be valuable and why it's a missed opportunity that everyone in here hasn't already tackled.
Makes sense. Kiran, do you have an answer to that question?
I think 3D is unexplored in AI compared to the other modalities like text and images. So I would say that any startup or a big company that cracks that puzzle and makes it really useful is going to be to usher in a new wave of content creation and 3D in general.
Go a little deeper on that for me. What makes 3D useful? What are the constraints that are not good enough today? Why is that an area worth exploring?
I think it's really fundamentally very hard to create in 3D, right? I mean, I think the tools are complex. It requires a lot of training. You can go to Midjourney and create a beautiful image. I don't think you can do that in 3D. So I'm just painting that as a picture of one of the things that you can do if you had a 3D foundation model. And it's not clear how to build it. So I think a combination of lack of data, lack of understanding of how to actually go about it correctly, the research and the engineering challenges, and ultimately making it useful for creators to build products and make money is what makes it exciting.
That sounds great. And Jorge, to flip it for you, if you could join any big company, preferably with a huge amount of equity being sold to make it happen, but if you were going to join any big company, who would you want to work with?
Huh. Well, I mean, there are a lot of companies that I think it wouldn't be a company that is just trying to keep its place, that just pays you a lot of money to be there. It should be a company that strives to something and something bigger, and that also the structure in which they work allow for a bit of freedom. To give, I don't know, I mean, not to give a lot of compliments. I think Roblox, for example, is one of the most exciting companies out here. Damn it! I'm a bit. No, I think
I'm sure Kiran knows the corp dev team. We can talk.
Let me explain. Like it's well, now I'm gonna give more compliments. It's a problem that is differentiated. They allowed kids to make games in ways which are easier, and the problem is very interesting. How do you make games so easy to create that a kid can do that? That's a vision worth pursuing. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised if an indie team created a game like GTA. I think that the cost of making a AAA game is going to go down from 150 million on average to 200K, something like that. I think that's going to happen. And enabling that kind of transformation is something very exciting. It's something that we're trying to do at Latent, because animation and interactivity are completely fundamental for that. And you cannot do that without transforming them. But I don't know, I think Roblox is also doing that. I'm also a big fan of League of Legends.
Sorry, I know they're a corp dev guy too,
social,
so we can make some introductions.
And I like the research that you guys are doing. And social experiences, which are very dynamic and produce a lot of community. I think that's very nice.
That's wonderful. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I'll make a final note that Latent, Jorge's company, is doing a demo today at 4 p.m., so please check that out. And again, tomorrow at 1:45 p.m., so you can see it in action. All right, thanks, everybody.